Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Bit. I'm Conrad Snover, CEO of Procurability, and I'm joined by Omid Gamami, President at the PSCM Institute. Sorry. Thanks for being live with me today. Good to see you. For all those who are listening in live, please feel free to drop questions into the chat as we go. We'll answer them at the end of the event, and if we run out of time, we aren't able to address anything, we'll just follow up afterwards. So let's dive in. Start with the big picture. Procurement is at a crossroads. You know, the traditional playbook can't keep up with today's pace of business and disruption and expectations. For years, measured by cost and compliance, what we often call often driver, responding to issues, anticipating them. The result is teams end up spending too much time firefighting instead of driving enterprise and future-proofing their operation. The organizations that are thriving today, from transactional measures to outcome-based measures, they're asking what value actually deliver, how did we reduce risk, accelerate time to market, and enable growth. So, Omid, thanks again for joining me for today's discussion. Let's start by discussing, so why do you believe performance outcomes have shifted so quickly from being optional to now being essential? And Omid, you are on mute, actually. I know we were having some technology challenges early on here, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So, Conrad, thank you so much for having me. This is truly an important topic. We've been riding the cost savings horse for decades in this profession, but cost savings really alone aren't enough. We're under pressure as a procurement organization to drive resilience, innovation, speed, and much more. And the thing I want to call your attention to, everyone's attention to, is we're so focused on the acquisition of goods and services instead of performance results. And that is eroding EBIT. It's impacting business unit results. It's impacting time to market. It adds unnecessary costs to the equation. And frankly, it's giving procurement a black eye because it's having us be responsible for the results of demand that was not properly articulated for outcomes by the business units. In short, what's ended up happening is we're expediting and automating bad decisions very early in the procurement process. And then the results of that don't manifest until the end. And at the end of the process, the suppliers already have our money. And so it's a major problem.
I love how you tee this up because it really presents the issue of procurement, or the opportunity for procurement to not just go buy the thing that's required, whether it's a good or service, but to really work collaboratively and figure out what's needed and get the end state, procure the end state, the objective. You know, I recall many years ago when it became the norm to change the technical requirements in contracts from explicitly requiring time and tactical work management to performance-based, to outcome-based.
Yes.
You know, the first example that pops into my mind is janitorial services. You know, do you specify frequency of each cleaning item? You know, vacuuming, mopping, waxing, emptying the garbage, wiping the tables, or do you specify the cleanliness, the outcome, and rely on the supplier to actually do the job that they're an expert to do?
Absolutely.
You know, that was, I'm thinking 25 years ago. And since then, we've seen this concept expand to impact almost every single category, including many that we'd consider very strategic today, like marketing, capital construction, large things. So I think this is a very topical point. Now, looking beyond procurement, Omid, can you share your opinion on the impacts to the enterprise at large from making this shift? And why should this be on anyone's radar or perhaps everyone's radar?
Well, I've been doing this for 31 years now, and been lucky enough to work with dozens of the Fortune 500. And I can tell you, business units and the enterprise are being tragically affected by the wheels coming off the bus on high criticality contracts. And how does it start? What's the root cause? If you peel the layers of the onion, it's that we, procurement, allow the end users to focus on what they want to buy instead of what they want to accomplish. And that's a huge distinction. And I want to make it clear, I think it's our fault for letting that happen. We're the gatekeepers. Um, and so, what I'm seeing in the profession is that procurement professionals, and to a certain extent, the business units too, are spending, as a consequence, 70 to 90% of every day in unplanned activities. And if you just unpack that, this prevents us from doing the jobs that we were hired to do, because we're firefighting instead with supplier quality issues, performance issues, delivery issues, and so forth, emergencies. And on top of that, when the demand is not designed for performance results, then it's also not designed for cost or TCO. We're seeing between 10 and 18%, and to be honest with you, closer to 18% average unnecessary costs embedded in the business unit scope of work and specs because they weren't written cost efficiently. And our profession keeps looking for cost savings at the negotiation table, which is fine. But that's not where most of the money is. Most of the money is in how the demand is articulated. And our profession tends to accept the demand as being correct, when in fact it's usually full of opportunity to go and address. And we have to go after this low-hanging fruit.
You know, I think that there's been a watering down of terms over time. Uh, the difference between purchasing and strategic sourcing and category management uh, is really what we're talking about here. Do we take the request and go buy that thing, or do we figure out what's truly needed and look at the total cost and the total picture of what's involved with utilizing that material or service and figure and look for any opportunity for savings, whether it's better managing your lease terms and managing your inventory better, so you don't have a bunch of things sitting around that you're not using anymore. Has nothing to do with your supply base. It has everything to do with your internal cost model, your internal process flow, but it's related to that thing. In this case, this is example, IT hardware, uh, as a whole picture. So procurement, we talk about savings, but how much savings if we don't spend the money at all? And
Yes.
so I think really taking a critical look at what it is we need and how we're going to go after it is what we're talking about today. So with that context of the landscape and challenges, why don't we talk about the power framework?
Yes.
Problems, outcomes, words, remedies. It's been helping procurement teams rethink how they structure contracts, measure success, and communicate value within the strategic sourcing mindset.
Absolutely. So I kind of consider this the four legs of the stool, Conrad. And it's important to put it in that context, because if one leg is gone, the stool falls. And that's exactly what this framework is. So it starts with, the P, the problem you're solving. What problem are we trying to solve? If you don't get oriented around that, then you're going to have endless issues, because then you're focused on what you want to buy, and what you want to buy may not solve the problem, or it may not do it effectively or cost effectively. Then you have to reverse engineer that into outcomes. What does success look like when we get there? And turning those into performance, into KPIs, measurable KPIs, and shifting that contractually to the supplier. Then we have to align the words. And contracts, a standard contract template doesn't know what you're buying. It has no idea. We have to bring it to life. And there's all sorts of words in the contract that are subject to interpretation and what I call convenient confusion by suppliers. We have to clean all those up. Otherwise, the supplier says, oh, well, what you're experiencing is part of what we consider to still be uptime, or we consider that good working order. So you have to define these words so that there's no loopholes for the supplier to deliver anything but outcomes. Then we get to remedies. You have to predefine what is going to happen in the event the supplier fails to perform. There's equitable remedies and legal remedies. These have to be thought through. And guess what? If you put those in the contract, the supplier sees it, they're less likely to fail because they know the consequence of not failing. And if they do fail, there's no more firefights. Instead of your hair being on fire, you just say clause 6, section 2, go do it. It just makes things far easier. The end game is performance results, dramatically reduce firefighting, and even shaving costs out of the purchase. And I want you to know this is not academic. I lived this during my career and lived this transformation. So I'm a big disciple.
The shift sounds simple. It sounds very logical, but and it is if you follow it through as you describe very thoughtfully and methodically. But the results are truly transformative. It moves procurement from a transactional buy and enforce model to a solve and deliver mindset, right? Don't specify the minute tasks. Instead, hold the contractors accountable for the tangible outcomes. What are we trying to achieve here?
Yes.
So let's make this real. What are some examples you can share of how performance outcomes transformed, a client's operations?
Well, let me give you an example that's pretty meaningful to me. And I've kind of seen this with a lot of clients, but one of my clients was in the packaged food industry. And they, after being taught these concepts, they started to implement it. One of the things we found was they had these single serving packages of food that they were selling. All of these single serving packages had a zipper across the top. Well, that zipper was costing them 17%. In other words, 17% of the total product cost, including the food itself, was being attributed to the zipper. So now the clients started asking themselves, they learned the idea. What is the performance outcome of the zippers? And now we understand what they're there for, but once you put it into the context that this is being marketed and sold as a single serving pouch. If it's a single serving pouch, what do you need a zipper for? The zipper was unnecessary. It wasn't solving any problem. So getting rid of it was the easiest 17% this company ever saved. And now they're doing it across all their other product lines. And by the way, all of this happened without needing to hammer suppliers for discounts. And so I'm never going to say stop hammering suppliers, but I will say stop assuming that all the money is there. It's plenty of money is to be found elsewhere. This is a great example of that.
I love that example. It's like specification review and the needs assessment and what are we actually buying and what are we using it for and why do we have it designed that way and supplier would they don't care if they provide it with a zipper or not. So you're not negotiating any, the results of the negotiation aren't hardship for the supplier. It's a mutual benefit across the board. I can share an example, for a utility that we worked with who achieved over 20% savings from changing how they manage vegetation management contractors. Originally the utility identified every branch that needed to be cut and every tree that needed to be removed. And then the contractor came in and performed the work. Then the contractor inspected their own work. Then the utility inspected the contractor's work. And by the way, along the way here, the contractor is also responsible for identifying any cuts that should have been identified that utility missed, and then for making those cuts. And so we said, wait a minute. And we restructured the whole thing to hold the contractor responsible for maintaining compliance. Yes. And to do so, they had to list, then cut, then inspect their assigned circuit, their area of work. And then the utility just spot checked and did some audits. Massive savings through the elimination of that duplicative work. and compliance increased because it turns out professional vegetation management companies are really good at tree trimming, right? So the other thing is looking at having the supplier do a really good job at what they're really good at, and don't sort of over design things in a way that can often be inefficient.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can share with you another example, Conrad, speaking of utility, I worked with one of the largest utility companies in the United States. And one of the things they were spending a lot of money on, ironically, was PVC pipes. They were putting PVC pipes everywhere. Now, do a deeper dive, come to find out 30% of the product cost was going to stamping this utility company's name on the pipe every 12 inches. Okay. It turned a standard product into a custom product. And what's wrong with that? It's their pipe. They wanted to know whose it was. Well, the problem was these pipes were being buried 3 feet underground, and they already had, by this point, geospatial software that could track where the pipes were. Um, and so by employing these concepts, the question was was employed, which was, what is the value? What is the performance outcome of putting your name on these pipes when we can track it elsewhere? It was a legacy practice that they still continued. They couldn't figure out whose decision it was to do this. Now, this was, again, the easiest 30% cost savings this company ever achieved. And they were spending millions of dollars on this. And if you can believe this, the suppliers were thrilled to be making 30% less money. Why? Because they didn't want to be in the custom PVC pipe business either. It required separate manufacturing line with stamping, separate inventory, separate logistics. They didn't want to be in that business. They didn't want the 30% money. They were thrilled to make less. And so, amazingly, it was a win all the way around.
It's powerful, and it shows that when you measure what truly matters, the business impact compounds a cost, efficiency, reputation, business unit alignment, um, sort of a better place to work for everybody, right? And the great results come from telling the expert what you want the state to be, letting them do the work, and holding them accountable for the excellence. And so I love these examples. And in my mind, I always boil it down to what I said initially, that this is just true strategic sourcing. Strategic sourcing is not just buying the thing, but it's really understanding what it is we're looking for. So for all the procurement leaders watching today who want to start this shift, I often advise my clients to start by mapping where firefighting happens most. Ask the question, what are the recurring problems that we're solving repeatedly? That, in my experience, is usually where performance-based contracting can have the biggest impact. Then engage your stakeholders early, build trust and co-create those outcome definitions with them so that you really collaborate around, you create a collaborative environment around what the solution is. And that conversation engages the business and procurement and the suppliers. And then third and finally, don't underestimate the people side of transformation, even just for a contract. How many times have we written a really fancy contract that's new, and maybe the field users don't know how to use it, or the suppliers are uncertain how to do it or how to follow it? So we really need to make sure that procurement maintains leadership all the way through training, communication, alignment with how to use these, the new model, because that's what's required to sustain the change.
I love that, Conrad. And it really gets to the heart of the matter, the metrics that matter: reduced escalations, faster launches, measurable P&L impact, contributions to EBIT. And here's another seed I'd like to plant with everyone. Just as importantly, doing this liberates the procurement workforce. Because imagine going from 70 to 90% unproductivity every day. And I define unproductivity as unplanned activities. I promise you, everybody in on this call is spending 70 to 90% of every day in unplanned activities. That includes regularly scheduled meetings to address the unplanned activities of the day. And reducing that all the way down to 20 or 25%. We'll never get rid of it completely. It's almost like doubling your workforce. And so we never have enough headcount. But if you can do this, you can dramatically increase your net effective headcount. And then the business units win too, because they're the ones who have to live with these purchases. Now, post contract, all those headaches and nightmares go away. They too get to focus on their day jobs instead of firefighting. So they too get liberated. And if we do this right, Conrad, then procurement is no longer a roadblock. They're an enabler to achieving enterprise value. Business units will finally engage us early because they want to and not because policy says they have to. We get out of the back office and it becomes a win all the way around for all the players. This is where we want to be with procurement.
100%. Let's stop doing the work that isn't fun and doesn't deliver value, and let's focus more time on what's truly needed and how to get there. So, Omid, I'm just wondering, maybe we pause here for an audience question. So anybody who's listening, here's a question for you all. Within the next, I don't know, say 18 to 24 months, what do you think will change most for you as a procurement leader in the way you measure and report out the value of your organization's contributions to the business? So now take this performance-based metric and the results and say, how do you see things changing? Or how do you see things changing in your environment? And then how can we use more of a performance managed mindset to support that? So drop your answer in the chat. And let's kind of end on this future-focused vision for procurement's strategic role in the enterprise, talking about, building what Omid just talked about, where procurement is elevating its role through tighter alignment with the business, which is opening the door to more invitations to get involved in more things, because the business sees procurement as delivering a tremendous amount of value, results, not just materials. So maybe, Omid, as we wrap up and people are answering a question in the chat or throwing some ideas in the chat, what's one piece of advice you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, here's the thing is procurement inherently assumes that what the end user asks for is correct. And then we take that and go and try and achieve savings at the negotiation table. And if you could mute there, Conrad. Um, I I would say to redo this model. I think procurement should assume respectfully that what the end user asks for is inherently incorrect, or perhaps inefficient, because it's not designed for performance results, and then therefore it's not designed for cost either. If you start doing that and collaborating earlier, to streamline it for those two things, then you can start achieving savings away from the negotiation table. And I'll say this, you can achieve more savings away from the negotiation table, streamlining the demand for performance results and for costs, than you can hammering suppliers at the negotiation table. Now, this is not an either or. I think we need to be doing both of these things. And on a more strategic level, measure what matters. If you're not speaking the CEO's language, it's time to rewrite the playbook. From my perspective, we've come too far in this profession to do it any differently. So, Conrad, let's take it back to you. What would you say as we close out today's conversation?
I would say influence follows impact. For many years, procurement's been requesting a seat at the table, and for many years, I've been explaining to procurement that seat, it needs to be earned, and the way that seat is earned is by delivering results, by delivering tangible impact, like we've talked about today. The influence that procurement has in the organization will follow from those results, will follow from making a successful impact across the organization that's outsized from just going and buying the thing that needs to be bought. This transformation starts with how we think and how we communicate and how we lead. So I think my advice would be champion a culture where helping the business achieve real measurable outcomes is what defines success. And I'm going to take it back to the question I asked the audience a second ago. I see two answers that are interesting. Number one, so actually, let me just pause it. The question I asked was within the next 18 to 24 months, what do you, for you as a procurement leader, and the way you measure and report out the value of your organization's contribution to the business? Two answers that popped to mind here that the top of the list. One, shift from cost centric to enterprise. I mean, spot on, right? Stop looking at, did you widget? Let's talk about how we had a real measurable business impact. Nobody cares if the payment is a little bit cheaper. The project get done on time.
Yes.
Did the project get done under budget? So procurement enabling that success. Now we're talking. Now procurement is relevant. So I think it's building that relevance. The second topic, and is basically a greater need for enterprise alignment and effective ROI storytelling. And so how does procurement sell its value and capture the wins that we're talking about here, getting that project done on time, getting that project done under budget, and working within finance and the business to say, here's what we all together achieved. I think telling that story about this effective procurement model, I think, will be absolutely critical.
If I could just add to that, relative to the comment for leveraging AI to speed up and automate day-to-day activities and so forth, and automate and speed up procurement, it's both a blessing and the curse. The blessing is exactly what it states. Things happen faster. The curse is we automate and speed up bad decisions, and automated chaos is still chaos. So if the end user requests something that is not designed for performance results and therefore not designed for cost, all you're doing is expediting that with AI or with S2P solutions or so forth. It's our job. Nobody will do it. No tool will do it for us. We have to get up in front and analyze the demand and help clean it up to ensure it's designed for performance outcomes. Then we run it through our systems and AI capabilities. So I think this is a critical shift.
Well, and I see technology improvements like you described as really enabling procurement to change the level of engagement, to stop spending time on the transactional activities, to automate and improve and use technology to create a platform for more efficient execution of the transactional procurement workflow, and enabling procurement to spend more times doing the things that we're talking about today, right? So that's how I'd like to see, or I'd like to encourage the procurement teams to see how this technology should be used, at least immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
we're taking it further on in other things, but table stakes is really addressing that transactional piece. Well, I'm just looking at the clock here. Why don't we wrap it up? Thank you, Omid, for sharing your insights on driving performance through outcomes. I've really enjoyed the conversation today. It sounds like we're well, as we know, we're very closely aligned on this philosophy. So, when procurement leads this pivot from, or pivot to outcome-based work, really earns that seat at the strategy table. Just repeating a couple concepts from today. It's not just about savings, but it's really driving business performance and alignment and collaboration across the business. So to everybody out there, if you'd like to learn more, you can connect with us on LinkedIn, or sign up to receive Procurability's insights, and check the chat here for notifications of our upcoming events. But Omid, to you, thanks again. I think that wraps up our time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Have a wonderful